Before he became the most famous entertainer on the planet, Michael Jackson was just a quiet boy from Gary, Indiana, dressed in a suit, carrying a Watchtower magazine, and knocking on strangers' doors. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. Michael, along with his brothers from the Jackson 5 and his devout mother Catherine, were all raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. While millions screamed his name on stage, the religion he grew up in saw his fame not as a blessing, but as a spiritual threat. Behind the glittering lights and chart-topping hits, there was a world of strict rules and silent judgment. Jehovah's Witnesses forbid birthdays, holidays, certain medical procedures, and discourage association with worldly people, including celebrities. Michael wasn't just criticized, he was reprimanded by church elders. After the release of Thriller, the Watchtower organization considered his music demonic. In a desperate attempt to stay in the faith, Michael even wrote a public apology letter, but it wasn't enough. So what exactly happened? Why did Michael get disfellowshipped? Why did some family members stay in the religion while others walked away? And how did this background shape the emotional, complex, and often misunderstood legacy of the Jackson family? In this video, we'll uncover 7 little-known facts about the Jacksons' hidden connection to the Jehovah's Witnesses, including stories of fear, guilt, loyalty, and escape. If stories like this intrigue you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and there are many more untold truths waiting to be uncovered. 1. It all started with Catherine Jackson. The spiritual journey of the Jackson family didn't begin with Michael. It started with his mother, Catherine Jackson. In the early 1960s, while raising her growing family in Gary, Indiana, Catherine was introduced to the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. She quickly embraced the religion's strict moral code, apocalyptic worldview, and rejection of mainstream society. For her, this faith offered structure, hope, and a sense of purity in a chaotic world. And as the matriarch of the Jackson household, her beliefs would soon become the foundation of the entire family's spiritual life. Catherine didn't just attend meetings, she became deeply involved in the congregation, attending Kingdom Hall regularly and studying the Watchtower publications diligently. She insisted that her children follow the same path. This meant no birthdays, no Christmas, no national holidays, and a strong separation from worldly influences. Even as the Jackson 5 began to rise to fame, Catherine was determined to shield her children from what she saw as spiritual corruption. In her eyes, Jehovah came first, no matter what the music industry demanded. This early religious training shaped the worldview of all the Jackson children, but especially Michael, who was particularly sensitive, obedient, and eager to please his mother. Long before he became a pop icon, he was just a young boy sitting quietly during meetings, memorizing Bible verses, and being taught that the end of the world was near. This wasn't just faith, it was a complete framework for life. And it would follow him, even into the spotlight. 2. Michael preached door to door like every other witness. Despite being one of the most recognizable faces in the world, Michael Jackson still took part in one of the most basic and most controversial practices of Jehovah's Witnesses, door-to-door preaching. Dressed in a conservative suit and using the name Michael Joe Jackson to avoid drawing attention, he would quietly go from house to house with his fellow congregation members, offering Watchtower and Awake magazines and talking about God's kingdom. For many fans, this is unthinkable, but for Michael, it was simply what he had been taught to do. This activity wasn't optional. In Jehovah's Witness culture, going door to door is seen as a core duty, a direct command from God to preach the good news before the end of the world. Even while balancing rehearsals, recordings, and tours, Michael was expected to report his field service hours like any other member. There are even stories from neighbors and fans who were shocked to find Michael Jackson at their front door, offering Bible literature with a shy smile and little to say about his fame. But deep down, the contrast was tearing him apart. On one side, he was an international superstar. On the other, a young man trying to live up to the demands of a religion that viewed celebrity status as dangerous, even demonic. Michael's stage persona had to be hidden from his congregation. His success had to be balanced with guilt. And for a while, he tried, desperately, to live both lives. But the pressure was mounting, and the next chapter of his spiritual journey would prove far more painful. 3. The Thriller backlash that broke everything. In 1983, Michael Jackson released the now iconic music video for Thriller, a groundbreaking blend of horror, dance, and cinematic storytelling that redefined pop culture. But while the world was mesmerized, the reaction from the Jehovah's Witness leadership was swift and severe. The governing body viewed the video's themes of zombies, werewolves, and occult imagery as not just inappropriate, but spiritually dangerous. To them, Michael had crossed a line that no follower of Jehovah could justify. The pressure came fast. Elders from his congregation began contacting him, warning that his music was bringing reproach upon God's name. Michael, torn between his creative vision and his religious upbringing, panicked. In an attempt to salvage his standing in the church, he issued a formal apology letter to the Watchtower organization, stating that he would never again include satanic elements in his work. He even added a disclaimer to the Thriller video, clarifying that he did not believe in the occult. But it wasn't enough. The damage had already been done. For the elders, Thriller wasn't just a misstep, it was evidence that Michael's loyalty to Jehovah was compromised by fame and ego. From that point on, his relationship with the religion that had shaped his entire life began to unravel. The video may have cemented his place in music history, but behind the scenes, it triggered a spiritual crisis that would end in exile. 4. Michael was officially disfellowshipped and shunned. By the mid-1980s, after years of internal conflict, Michael Jackson was officially disfellowshipped by the Jehovah's Witnesses, their term for excommunication. This decision wasn't just a formality, it came with a harsh consequence: shunning. From that moment on, faithful members, including friends and even family, were expected to limit or cut off contact with him. For someone who had grown up inside the close-knit, rule-driven world of the Watchtower, this was more than rejection. It was spiritual death. The reasons for his disfellowshipping were never publicly disclosed by the organization, as is typical. But insiders point to a combination of factors: the Thriller backlash, his refusal to abandon his career, and his growing distance from congregation life. Michael had simply become too big, too public, and too uncontrollable. For a religion that demands strict conformity, his global stardom was incompatible with loyalty to the organization. So the decision was made, and the judgment was final. Michael rarely spoke openly about his disfellowshipping, but the pain was evident. He continued to avoid holidays and birthdays for years afterward, and he often referenced a deep sense of guilt, fear, and isolation in interviews. The Watchtower may have shut its doors on him, but the psychological chains of his upbringing were harder to break. Even as he moonwalked across global stages, part of him was still looking over his shoulder, wondering if Jehovah was disappointed. 5. The faith stayed in the family, even after Michael left. While Michael Jackson's break with the Jehovah's Witnesses was public and painful, not everyone in the Jackson family followed the same path. His mother, Catherine Jackson, remained a devoted witness throughout the decades. Even after Michael's disfellowshipping, she continued attending Kingdom Hall, reading Watchtower literature, and maintaining her status within the organization. Her loyalty never wavered, and that created a complicated emotional distance between her and her son. It's unclear exactly how the rest of the family responded, but several of Michael's siblings also had ties to the religion. Some distanced themselves quietly, while others, like Janet Jackson, walked away completely. Janet, in particular, faced her own conflict. As a rising star in the entertainment industry, she too had to choose between fame and faith. She eventually chose her career, but in interviews, she's hinted at the lingering emotional weight of her strict religious upbringing. Catherine, on the other hand, has rarely addressed her son's excommunication publicly. But those close to the family suggest that her faith remained a source of inner conflict, especially after Michael's death in 2009. Some reports claim she still believed Michael could be resurrected in the new world, the Witnesses' version of paradise after Armageddon. Whether or not that's true, one thing is certain: the Watchtower's influence never left the Jackson home, even after its most famous member was cast out. 6. Michael struggled with fear, guilt, and apocalyptic anxiety. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witness isn't just about rules, it's about fear. And for Michael Jackson, that fear stayed with him long after he left the religion. In several interviews, he described being terrified of Armageddon, the end-of-the-world event that Jehovah's Witnesses believe is imminent. As a child, he was told that God would soon destroy everyone who wasn't a faithful member, including friends, neighbors, and even some family. For a sensitive boy with a vivid imagination, this belief became a source of nightmares. But it wasn't just fear of destruction, It was guilt. Michael said he felt constantly unworthy, like he was disappointing God with his music, his fame, and his dancing. Even when he was performing for millions, there was a part of him that still felt condemned. He spoke about crying alone, about reading the Bible obsessively, and about trying to stay clean in a world that seemed full of sin. The voice of his religion, and his mother's expectations, echoed in his mind long after the applause faded. This spiritual trauma is something rarely discussed in Michael's legacy. While the world focused on his eccentricities and controversies, few understood that behind his perfectionism, his isolation, and his longing for approval was a boy who had been taught to fear everything outside his faith. For Michael, leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't mean freedom. It meant walking into a world he had been taught to fear, without a roadmap, and without peace. 7. The Jacksons' religious past is still a silent shadow. Even today, the Jackson family rarely speaks about their time as Jehovah's Witnesses. It's almost as if that chapter has been quietly erased, a shadow that still lingers but is never acknowledged. Michael never gave an in-depth public interview about his disfellowshipping, and his family has consistently avoided addressing the topic in documentaries or memoirs. For a family so often in the spotlight, their religious past remains one of the most tightly guarded parts of their legacy. Some believe this silence isn't accidental. It's the result of lingering fear, shame, or a desire to avoid conflict with remaining witness relatives. Others see it as a sign of unresolved trauma. After all, being part of a high-control religion isn't something you just walk away from. It shapes your worldview, your identity, and even your sense of worth. For the Jacksons, especially Michael, that influence didn't end when the Kingdom Hall doors closed. It followed them through award shows, interviews, and private breakdowns. And while fans remember the music, the dancing, and the unmatched talent, few realize the emotional cost that came with it all. Michael Jackson may have redefined entertainment, but behind the glittering curtain was a man who carried the silent burden of a religion that demanded obedience, punished dissent, and fractured families. The story of the Jacksons and the Watchtower isn't just a footnote. It's a warning, and one more layer in the tragic complexity of a global icon. Michael Jackson's story is often told through headlines, scandals, and superstardom. But behind the stage persona, there was a boy raised to fear the world, a teenager shamed for his talent, and a man torn between faith and freedom. The influence of the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't just shape his childhood, it haunted his identity, his relationships, and perhaps even his downfall. For the rest of the Jackson family, that faith still casts a long, quiet shadow. Some stayed, some left, and some, like Michael, paid the price for walking away. But their story opens a deeper question. What happens when religion becomes a prison, even for the most gifted people on earth? If this video made you reflect, leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you want more untold stories like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. There's so much more behind the spotlight, and together, we're going to uncover it.